Now we have evidence now, since that early work, to support the involvement of this serotonin pathway here. If we apply serotonin blocking agents, drugs like sinanserin, which block the serotonin receptor down here, we can abolish this pathway and decrease acupuncture. Also, we give chemicals that can change the function of this nucleus. PCPA will block the function of this nucleus, and that will interfere with acupuncture. And recently, in China, it was shown that if you cut the DLF tract, which is a very small tract in the spinal cord coming down, if you cut it right here, you will abolish this part of the acupuncture pathway. Most recently, we have been putting naloxone directly on the spinal cord. So we can chronically implant the spinal cord of rats and inject naloxone. And when we do that, it will also abolish. So if we give naloxone just locally on the cord, it will work, as well as the previous experiment where we gave it intravenously. So there are various sites. The Chinese have recently injected naloxone right in here, and when they injected the naloxone, it too abolished the effect. So there are many independent types of experiments all supporting this pathway. In addition to this dotted line which releases naloxone and this system which works through serotonin, we have this third line which goes up to the pituitary and releases endorphin into the bloodstream, ED here. And this is a blood vessel carrying the stuff. It has to come back across the blood-brain barrier at this point to block transmission, and has to cross the blood-brain barrier so here on the thalamus, again inhibiting pain transmission. So this time endorphin is acting as a hormone in the blood, whereas here endorphin is acting as a neurotransmitter at a pain cell or in a pain inhibiting pathway. And here endorphin is acting as a transmitter, but here endorphin is acting as a hormone because it has to go through the blood and do this. Now, in the last couple of years, there's been quite a bit of controversy as to whether blood endorphin actually can cross the blood-brain barrier in sufficient amounts. But recently, a new pathway has been found, namely from the pituitary directly into the brain through the reverse portal blood flow. But normally, the portal vein from the brain sends transmitters from the hypothalamus down to the pituitary. But now it's been found that there's a reverse flow, that is, it can go backwards into the brain. And so if endorphin, beta endorphin from the pituitary can get into the brain, it can, say, get over to this cell and block its transmission directly. So you don't have to cross the blood-brain barrier that way. And that's a current hypothesis. Anyway, we tested the pituitary in 3 different ways. In one experiment, we removed the pituitary gland, and we found that it interfered with the acupuncture effect. In other experiments, we chemically altered pituitary function. One way of doing that was to inject cortisone derivatives into the blood. And because the pituitary releases not only endorphin, but it also releases ACTH together. So if we give cortisone, this suppresses ACTH and also suppresses beta endorphin. So when we did that experiment, it was like removing the pituitary, but it was chemically done. We abolished the acupuncture effect. And we've done a variety of other experiments, all supporting the idea that the pituitary is also important in this phenomenon. So we have 3 pathways. One is the direct endorphin, the other one is endorphin via serotonin, and the other one is pituitary releasing endorphin to the blood, or also going direct into the brain. So there's 3 different ways. Now, we also have some more direct evidence on this point. We have been, and others, have been measuring endorphin secretion into the cerebrospinal fluid. That would be fluid that's right outside the cells, bathing the cells. And when we collect the cerebrospinal fluid during acupuncture, several groups now, there's a group in China, a group in Sweden, and a group in the States as well as us, have shown that endorphin levels are increased during acupuncture.